Hi, Bhaskar. Good to see you. Sorry, we haven't had a chance to catch up informally, but I'm at least glad that we can meet here on Arisa's podcast, Native Narratives. This is season two. Very happy to have you here today. And for our listeners and viewers, we're speaking today with Dr. Bhasker Malu, who is one of my closest friends, but also someone who wears a lot of different hats: entrepreneur, researcher, social scientist, professor, fiction writer. So, for those who are interested in reading, you can go read his books, Homeward Bound and An Endless Search for Home. Hopefully, I got the titles right. Too many home things in there. Anyways, I'm, I'm very happy to have you today, Bhaskar, talking about all things Indian academia, research, careers for psychology, and beyond. So, over to you,
Thank you for
Bhaskar.
having me. Looking
Sorry?
forward to it. Thank you for
Yay!
having me. Looking forward to it. Yeah.
I'm very happy. We're going to keep overlapping each other while talking, which is going to be great for our editor. But hey, that's what this banter is all about. But Bhaskar, before we dive right into the topic, do you want to talk a little bit about what you currently do, how you got there, what's your journey been like, just for our listeners and viewers to have a little bit of background? I've known you for over 16 years, I think now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a while since it. Yeah, or maybe 12 years. I don't know. We'll do the
No, no.
math later, but definitely
15.
over a decade. So please walk the listeners through your life.
Oh
Elevator
my
pitch
God.
starts now.
Right now, I'm a professor at Masters Union, which is a Gurgaon-based university institute, where the focus is on learning by doing. So the focus is on knowledge building by skill building, right? And that's a major gap in Indian academia, which we've known for a long time, that our university structure and the learning at the university doesn't always translate well into real life work skill, and often organizations have to retrain a lot of the students after their education. So Masters Union is kind of filling that gap, and there are other institutes like this across the country that are now growing to sort of plug this increasing demand, right? Which I think is a fantastic thing to be involved in. Apart from that, my journey, I was what we were together at our undergraduation at Ferguson College. Then I did master's, PhD. I've worked in Indian academia for 10 years. Can you believe it now? I was 23 when I
Wow,
started. Yeah.
that's crazy.
I was thinking
That
about
is
it
a
the other day. I
decade.
was like, it's been a decade and I don't feel so old. I started when I was 23, right? And
That's a good
that
way to
was,
slip your age in, by the
yeah, still young, hopefully.
way.
Depends on your listeners.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, Uncle Ji, continue.
yeah, so then I worked for a couple of years in a college in Siliguri, and then I moved to Christ University for 3.5 years. I taught there. I simultaneously did my PhD while being a full-time assistant professor there. Um, then I moved into the corporate sector for a bit because I just wanted to kind of experience it and know for sure whether I want to be in academia, because I joined academia immediately after my master's. So I always had that nagging thought, right? Okay, have I, engaged in some identity foreclosure without really exploring the world? So I joined Ernst& Young, EY, with the help of a friend of ours who was a manager there for the UX department. And I worked there for 8, 9 months. And then I realized that maybe academia is where I want to take my career. So Upajindal Global University in Sonipat came calling, and then I worked there for 3 years. Um, and I ended that stint like a couple of months ago, where I finished it off as an associate dean and associate professor. And then now I'm at Masters Union. So that's the long and short of it. In the middle of it, I built apps for psychology education, books for exam prep, some couple of fiction books like you mentioned. Started something known as One Stop Psychology, which kind of now is laboring, let's say. It's there somewhere. And yeah, that's been the journey till now. Been quite fun.
Wow, that sounds amazing. I've known you to do this, all of this, and I think at some point I remember you'd send me your CV or something for feedback, or I don't know, for something at some point many years ago, and I was already looking at it, and I was like, वाह यार, कितना कुछ कर लिया, मेरे को पता भी नहीं था, बट गुड टू नो, गुड टू नो.
It's right back at you, but it's not like you're not having multiple hats all the time. It's the same.
Yeah, let's not make this into a mutual admiration club. As much as I love you, Bhaskar, I think we can stick to Indian academia, which I don't know if we both have a love-hate relationship with, probably.
Yeah.
But since you mentioned that you've been now in Indian academia for 10 years or more, almost, yeah, more than a decade, what has your experience been like? And you already kind of, touched on that about the gap in Indian academia
Mm,
and
mm.
this emphasis on rote learning and not, being able to apply things in practice. What's your experience been like, and how do you think it's changed over the last decade?
Um, yeah, so I think I've been thinking about this for a while. I've been wanting to write about it actually. I have some pages, chapters that I've kind of written about it. But I just want to give a caveat about it that I have worked exclusively at private universities. So whatever my thought is about is limited to that space, right? That's the
Right.
experience I've had. I do know how state and university and central governments universities work, but I don't have the experience of how what is happening internally there, right? So I can't really say much with absolute clarity about those things.
Mhm.
Even my education has been mostly in private universities, except Ferguson. Um, so that caveat, I think that disclaimer is kind of important to establish beforehand. Over the last 10 years, it has changed. It has considerably changed, where I think there's a lot more information available about the universities, about their culture, about the kind of faculty facilities that are there. Universities are actively trying to market themselves in terms of their infrastructural things, how great their infrastructure is, how great their faculty are, how globalized their environment is, how much international exposure they have. So there is that uh, trend that's markedly you can see very clearly. Whereas when we were in college, we barely knew much about most universities, right?
Yeah.
Most university and college websites were kind of not functional. You had to apply multiple times to get your application through. Payments wouldn't go through. You had to download the soft copy and then send it as a uh, post to these universities and colleges for your application. Those
Yeah.
kind of things are now redundant because of internet and all of that, right? So there's that trend. Um, there's also a strange kind of um, hierarchy that has developed, right? A class system of sorts where
Mhm.
there is at the bottom of the rung, there are those old state colleges who are still catering to the marginalized rural groups, but they aren't supported very well, right? So they probably don't have really good faculty members or full-time faculty members rather, right? Then on above that, you have the state or central universities, uh, which aren't your Jadavpur or JNU or Delhi University, but the second tier of that, right?
Mhm.
And then the privatization of university culture has created this entire thing of private universities, which are uh, preferred for most people, right? Most people prefer it over like so. It's weirdly tiered where you have these really top-notch government institutes like IITs, IIMs, maybe a JNU, Jadavpur. These are still on top, right? But then there is a whole bunch which is below that, and in between are a lot of private universities, right? Um, who are essentially meant for people who are middle class and above who can afford an education,
Right.
um, and a privatized education which is slightly more expensive. And the USP of these private universities, most of them, is that we will provide you with syllabi and infrastructure that is better than the government ones. Our things will be more contemporary, it'll be more updated, and you will learn with more young faculty and all of that kind of thing, right? And then on top again, you have your IITs, IIMs, BITS Pilani, maybe a Christ, depending on the subject, obviously, and then OP Jindal for law and that kind of thing, right? And there is also another layer that has developed, which is like OP Jindal and say Ashoka, where the focus is on we will internationalize our education right?
Mhm.
So you will get that exposure through us, which you won't get from other private universities. So within that space also there is now a competition and a marketing of that fact that we'll give you an international exposure through maybe a summer school or a semester abroad or a dual degree program, and those are the things that they will offer, right? um, and then now the new thing that has come in are the fact that the NEP has allowed foreign universities to set up campuses in India. So a lot of the students who would probably go to these private universities so that they could get a pathway to go abroad will now directly be able to get a degree from these international universities by being in India without having to take the expense of living abroad, right? Which
Right.
is obviously it requires a lot of economic success and all of that, right? Um, and it's also a reflection of our society in many ways, right? Where uh, the class division is so stark that you can quite clearly see who's moving where and who can afford what, and that is determining where they end up.
Right.
Um, and then within that also now there is also a class system that's kind of developing with the treatment of faculty members, right? Who gets hired? What kind of people are you looking to hire? Um, so this is a controversial take that I have, but I call it like if you have if you're a foreigner and you have an international PhD for the private university, if you put out the government, because the government university still will require you to pass those filtration processes, right?
Right.
Um, and you'll need to have like an AQI score, API score, and something. All of these things are there. Um, and obviously there is uh, quote unquote alleged corruption in the system for getting access and jobs and all of that in the government space, right? But if I speak private universities, there is a tier system that kind of develops there also, right? So if you're an international PhD with a foreign degree as a foreigner, you are going to be creme de la creme,
Right.
right? And these top-notch private universities which are looking for internationalization will prefer you as faculty members in their institution because of course it helps their marketing, and that's the whole USP that they're going with, right? They're targeting that kind of an audience. And obviously your pay will be linked with that, and it will be at par with foreign universities. So when you convert that into Indian numbers, that's a huge number, right?
Right.
Then below that it will be people who have international PhDs but are Indians, right? That's the other wrong, right? Below that will be Indians who have Indian PhDs but from top tier institutes like IITs, IIMs, maybe a BITS, maybe Christ, I don't know, right? From a psychological point of view, probably that's part of the top tier system. And then you will have like NGNU and all of that, and then you will have the Indians who have Indian PhDs but not from these top recognized institutes, right? And then you have people who have net, and net is again another whole problematic situation. But that's largely how the system is kind of evolving now. Um, but with more international universities coming in, I'm not sure how this thing will kind of proceed now. It's interesting with the NEP. There's yeah, I don't know that's how the whole system kind of is developing. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting. And I think there's a lot of new learning for me as well. And I'm also in the space, right? So I think one question for you with all the systems and the new universities coming in and new systems kind of trying to be put into place by the new education policy as well, which is the NEP that you mentioned. What is there like a central resource or website or anything that students or even academics who are looking for jobs in India can look at to know where all these universities stand or where all these institutions are at, how they're recruiting students or academics
Mm,
as
mm,
professors or as in other roles, because I feel like there's so many opportunities now opening up. And of course, I mean, that goes without saying that the ones with privilege are the ones who will get access to a lot more than those without privilege. um, but where can people access this information? That's part one of the question. And second, if there is like a central resource, then who gets access to that the most, and how can we as RS or as researchers or people working in the space then be able to kind of increase the accessibility for these things, right?
So I think there are two parts of it, right? The ranking system exists. There is a ranking system, an IRF ranking system is there. But I think that's, if I remember correctly, it's as a university or a college, you can choose to be part of it or not, right? As a private institute, as a government one, I think you are kind of, you have to be part of the ranking system. So that gives you a ranking of colleges, universities that is uh, from the government's point of view on their metrics. Then you have all these other organizations like QS, Times, Higher Education Ranking. Then you have Siksha.com, whatever, the 10,000 other, these things are there, who will also rank universities and colleges based on disciplines, based on research, based on so many other things, right? Private, public, all of that. Um, so these are places where students will probably go and check to see the ranking, reputation, etc. of universities. For faculty hiring, there is no central system as far as I know. Every central university, every state university, every private university advertises in their own website, advertises in the newspaper, but they all do it at their own pace and at their own thing. So there is no central website that gives you, that keeps track of all of this. But I'm sure there are these small independent websites that are kind of trying to get these things on board. Um, but it's hard to keep track of. There are close to what, 3,000 universities plus in the country, so it's very difficult to keep track which subject what. And those advertisements are also very complex because they will specify eligibility, they'll specify which reservation category, what level of professor, which discipline under which center, or so it's kind of a lot to kind of read through. There is no centralized system for faculty hiring. Most times you'll see it works via networks mostly. Like you'll have colleagues who will be in different places who will find something and they'll send it on different groups, or you'll have an Indian Psychology Association group on WhatsApp where a lot of all this will come. So it's an informal network system that gives you access to a lot of these things. Um, but there is no centralized repository of that kind.
Right. Okay. Got it. I think that's an interesting answer, because I feel like then there's scope for us to also create that kind of a
Yeah.
repository, maybe for students, for faculty members,
Yeah.
but also for like people to just access this information, right? Like sometimes I will get my colleagues or my professors in international universities writing to me and saying, "Hey, Kohinoor, do you know where is this university standing in terms of rankings, or how good is this university? Because I have PhD applicants coming
Yeah.
in from there, and I don't know if
Yeah.
that's a good university or not in India, right?" And sometimes I say, okay, I know this by name, but like, of course, every student is different, and just because they come from a good university, obviously, doesn't mean that they're a good student, or vice versa, just
Or
because
the
they come
other.
from it. So I think there's just so much to unpack and so much contextual layers also around this whole topic. And that brings me to the next question, or the next part of like what I'd like to talk to you about is, what do you think students look for when they're applying to these universities, right? So by that I mean, you're on the other side of the spectrum, like you've been a professor and you see a lot of these students coming in, and there's been so much increase, I would say, in people wanting to take up social sciences and psychology as a field, more and more. What are students' expectations like, in your understanding? Are they really met by these higher education institutions? And what are certain maybe expectations they come with which are not met? So certain misconceptions they might hold about higher education in academia and in India, and what are the kind of ground realities that they actually face?
It depends on what socioeconomic background you come with, I think. I
Right.
think your expectations are uh, tapered by that to a great degree. Um, and it's unfortunate, but it's the truth. I don't want to kind of paper over that.
Of course.
Um, but I think that's one thing. And if specifically for social sciences and psychology, I think we're not doing a great job most places. Um, and now, within psychology, you can go and become a counselor, a therapist, a clinical psychologist, someone who works in the corporate sector as an industrial organizational HR person. Um, you can continue doing research, professor. These are major pathways that kind of exist. Um, there are, I think, within the private university space, there are less than 4 or 5 top quality institutions. which I would suggest to anyone, right? Of course, again, depending on whether you can pay, not pay, all of that is a different thing altogether. But there are four or five that would be recommended. Unfortunately, I never really recommend any government or state university as far as masters is concerned, right? Maybe for an undergrad, uh, but as far as masters is concerned, the private universities are um, these three, four are better because they give you 2 year degrees that are specialized, right? Um, what I really don't like is this entire archaic system that's still kind of perpetuated across the board, where you do 3 years of your undergrad and then your first year of masters is similar subjects like your 3 year undergrad, right? And then most places will let you specialize in the second year of your masters, which is not enough time for any kind of specialization, right? What is the point? If you're doing a masters, you do a 2 year block specialization. Um, and you see that difference. You see that difference play out in your discussions with people who have studied in a certain system with 2 year specialization compared to a 1 year specialization. And because and the cost of it is not just the learning, the cost of it is that in that 1 year of masters where you're repeating what you did in 3 years, you lose a lot of motivation and a lot of care for the subject, right? It's so repetitive. You have to forcibly go to college, hear the same thing again. It's boring, it's tiring, you already know. And God forbid you've had a really good faculty in undergrad and not so good one in the masters. In that year you will lose all desire to study that subject, right?
Right.
So that's one problem that even a lot of private universities are kind of not recognizing. um, but that is one important thing, right? um, Students are looking to learn, essentially, especially the people who want to study psychology or even the social sciences. They want to have built skill, right? But they are not obsessed. Like, their skill building is more a process oriented thing, where in order to understand something like a CBT or psychoanalysis, or even learn how to build an experiment, it takes a little bit of time, right? It's not like I don't know how engineering works or medicine works. I've not studied or I've not taught, but I imagine that that's because it's so analytical and it's so intellectually driven. It's easier to grasp quicker, right? And whereas to understand human behavior takes you some time to kind of delve deeper into yourself and other people and build that skill. It takes a little bit of time. So psychology kids are not obsessed with learning quickly, but they obviously want to build skill. And I don't think a lot of universities and colleges are able to do that. The other problem is when you look at, say, counseling or therapy and all of this, right? This sub dimension, sub discipline, a lot of colleges are not attached to hospitals or clinics. And if that is not there, where the hell are you going to learn, right? Most places ask students, you find internship on your own,
Mm.
which is unfair. If you're offering a counseling course, if you're also offering a clinical psychology course, right? Clinical psychology anyway, it has to be only MPhil or whatever. Now with the new system, it's completely it's a black box anyway. But you have to have, like, that's where Nimans, Ibhas, RML are good, right? At least they are hospitals where you are engaging. But over there also, it's exploitative to a great degree. You are doing OPD sessions for like 6 hours, 8 hours, non-stop. Like, so many churning of people, and there is no consistency in the clients you're seeing regularly, right? And everything is on rotation. So even that is dissatisfactory to a lot of people, right? Because you want to learn in depth and you want to learn ethically and properly and all of those things, right? Which the West does really well. The advantage is obviously they have lesser population, more economic prowess, can hire more people. But there is that is there, right? I think a lot of kids with psychology also come into the subject trying to understand themselves more than anything else, right? There is, I think, that acknowledgement of that is also important. That a lot of people come in with the hope of, at least at an unconscious level, are trying to get a grip of what is happening to them, and they're hoping that the subject kind of helps them with that. I don't think it really does that very well either, right? That personal development or self understanding is not part of the syllabus of any institution. They'll teach you social psych, development psych,
Yeah.
personality, right? But there is nothing that you're kind of working on yourself with. Um, which would be a nice thing to have, I guess, which would keep people interested. It would keep them kind of going, because there's a lot of disillusionment that happens. Is something that I've seen. People come in with the idea, oh, psychology, what a fantastic idea, what a fantastic subject. I'll get to know people, and then when you sit in the classroom, you're kind of not getting the same juicy material that you're expecting, right? Um, which is fair, not fair. That's a different discussion. And with the focus on science and positivism and all of that, it really takes the meat out of the whole thing, right? Um, but majorly, people want to get into therapy, is what I've seen. Therapy and
Mhm.
industrial organizational psych are the two main pillars in our country, at least. Other than that, there are now small, small niche areas that are coming up, but it will take time. And the fact that we don't have licensing, the complication around RCI running the show versus universities versus an MPhil or a PsyD, and this whole new thing that's happening in the confusion around it doesn't help.
Yeah, I totally understand with the confusion. I think a lot of students come to us as well at Arisa asking about clarity, and we're not able to give it either because we don't have that kind of clarity, right? So, I think you touched upon so many different things, Bhaskar, and I mean, I don't know if you have the time to go over all of those right now, but I think one thing that I would also like to add as a caveat is not all universities in the West are also good, right? So, I think
Sure.
there's also this.
Yeah.
Kind of superficial almost hierarchy in people's heads
Yeah.
about, or just because someone's trained in the UK or US or anywhere else in the world, it's better than being trained in India. So I think that's something that we should all acknowledge for sure, and I'm sure you agree with that as well.
Yeah.
um,
I've met. I, this is the problem that you've pinpointed it so well. Um, the idea in India is that the institution that you pass out from immediately gives you that thappa of being good, right? But I've met enough top universities of India and abroad and everything else, to know that at the end of the day, it boils down to you. You can pass out from wherever, right? Harvard may take the top cream of the world, right? But there's someone still who comes last in the classroom. so so you have to work on yourself, and you have to really, it doesn't matter which place you pass out from. If you don't work on yourself and if you don't build the skill set yourself, and institutions can help you, but at the end of the day, it boils down to your own work, and your own ability. uh, and really, you're right, it doesn't matter where you kind of pass out from. Yes, it will give you some edge, it will get you a job maybe.
right.
Will you be good at it? Then your degree will not really help you. um, and and I think that's the unfortunate thing in India. A lot of people get carried away, which is across the board. I don't think it's discipline specific. I think an IIT tag is an IIT tag irrespective.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, also, I think what a higher education institution, which is kind of top tier, can give is exposure and networking, right? Like, so the people you
Yeah.
meet at these universities are people probably you will not be able to meet at a different university, right? So I think that's the edge that we also get in terms of interactions and networking.
Yeah.
But all of that kind of apart, I think, Bhaskar, I wanted to also touch a little bit upon what you said in terms of the quality of education that is going out, and the expectations students have. And you mentioned that industrial organizational psych and clinical psychology are the two kind of broad themes or specializations people go for. And I think one of the things that I really liked what you said about these 2 year specializations and 1 year specializations kind of differences in terms of how people are learning. How do you think institutions can better manage this balance between being able to give something in practice versus theoretical learning and also academic rigor? So I know, for example, that clinical psychology being one of the more popular kind of specializations, some universities do try to give this, practical experience and internships and stuff like that. The condition, I would say, in the research specifically is really, like, I think it's worse than what it is for clinical psych practice. Because I mean, having been on the research side of
Yeah.
things, I'm just like, oh my God, like how is this not something that you're taught in the university, right? But I mean, I came from a similar background, and I went abroad and learned stuff, and I came back, and I'm not saying that people here are not doing it, but there is less awareness in the research space. But that apart, like, also this really sad thing about, like, when people were applying for positions at Arisa, and these are volunteering positions, right? they asked if they had to pay us. And that was a
Yeah.
shocker. That was an eye opener for me. I was like, what? You pay for volunteering your time? Volunteering your time? Like, I wish I can pay everybody who's working with me, including the volunteers. And, this coming from volunteers really broke my heart and really opened my eyes to what the state of internships and
Yeah.
positions was in Indian higher education institutions, right? So, on that note, a little bit on like what you can share about what can the institution do, but also what can we do working now from like a nonprofit space or more of a outside of academia but still linked to academia, or outside of higher education but still linked to higher education in psychology and social sciences. What do you think we can do as people to kind of help this, and what can institutions also do on their end?
Well, that's a difficult one. I think there is a ethos problem, right? And it's across the board. It's I don't want to say it's somebody's fault, but at some level, money making is more important than having the foresight that people need to mentor other people. And if you know something, it doesn't always have to be linked to economic sustenance, growth, income. Sometimes you can just help, and that's okay. You don't have to, associate everything with money. I think that's the crux of the problem. Everyone can, all these hospitals, other places that people have to pay in order to get internship are looking at internship as them giving free labor, and why should they free education, and why should they give free education? So they charge people for that education, right? So that's the mentality, and it's a mentality problem.
Right.
um, and the students are not, they are not, like, no matter how much money they have, they are not the privileged people in this thing, right? The privilege is with the institutions like these hospitals. They have the power. So the students, even though they don't want to obviously pay for an internship, they have to, because they know they have a limited time frame within which they have to learn. um, in many ways, the universities and colleges also suffer because of the attitude of the hospitals and the owners of those hospitals, because they're just trying to make money through this whole journey, right? So it has to come top down, unfortunately, right? um, and the thing with India is, if the government intervenes, then everyone listens. But if you leave them to their own devices, they will do stuff like this, right? They will cut corners all the time. um, Having said that, there aren't, like, it's not all these places that are doing this, but there is a huge chunk of organizations that are doing this. Um, the newer universities, the newer private universities, I can say, do a good job of this, of managing this whole thing, where they have career services and these offices, placement cells, and all of that, that kind of help students find internships. Students, obviously, internship now one of those things in India. I don't know how it works in the West, but the finding of an internship site is usually left to the student, right? Organizations help and institutes help, but a lot of the work is on the student, right? And a lot of places market themselves saying that you don't have to do this. So you can imagine the level at which it works, that institutes try and get students to join them by saying you don't have to take this pressure, right? So you can understand how pressurizing it might actually be.
Right, of course.
Um, so they do a good job of it. They find places where you don't have to pay. They build MOUs with them. They sign MOUs with them, so that they can offer, like, so Arisa can maybe work with the university and get access to research labs, whereas then the students of that university can get access to internship at Arisa, and then that mutually works, right? So a lot of them are doing this, which is a good thing. Um, but there are very few who are doing this, right? Because doing stuff like this also requires the university to have money to pay people who are probably professors, not professors, who are handling this kind of admin. Um, they also have to care a little bit, right?
Right.
Because when you do this, you're also kind of checking out the internship place whether they are good or not. You're kind of doing through that validation process also. So I know that some places make sure that any internship that the student goes to, which is a mandatory part of their program, goes through these offices. And only if they validate it and they say this is good, then can they take that internship. Because there are lots of times where people, we have all known people who have faked these internship sites and gotten signature from their uncle, aunt, somebody, you know, and just submitted and taken a holiday, right? Um, some institutes do this too much. Like their whole process of trying to find out if somebody has not done their internship is very extensive and stressful also, right? Which puts the whole thing into pressure, because what they'll end up doing is they'll put all their faculty into doing interviews with all of their students who have gone for internships, which increases the workload of the faculty apart from the teaching and research, right? The cost of that is extensive because you're giving 4 hours, 5 hours in one week just to do this, and that tires you out for the next week, and it kind of cascades like that, right?
Right.
My perspective on that has been pretty simple. Yes, you validate and you cross check, um, but the internship is for the student to learn,
Right.
and the student should be willing to learn. If they are not willing to learn and if they're trying to escape from the system, eventually they'll lose out, right? And as an adult, at some level, at 2021, you should have that kind of responsibility about your own life, right? um, so there's that. What institutions can do is this: they can reach out to places, sign these MOUs, offer something in return. But the problem is, I've also been, because I've had administrative positions, I've also seen some of the NGO, not-for-profit organizations, when they're approached by universities, they have the attitude of, what are we getting out of it? Give us a course to teach, right? Pay us for that course.
Hmm.
So they're still trying to extract money in some way, because their perspective is that we are offering knowledge to these students, and why should we offer this for free? Now, yes, from an economic point of view and a capitalist idea, yes, of course, why should you give anything for free if you can do anything, take money for it, right? uh, but sometimes you have to have a larger macro view of things, right? Look at it from a societal point of view. If you train somebody, that person will train somebody, and your subject will grow, right? But this is a mentality problem, as far as I can see.
Right.
And it's a very competitive society anyway, right? So, like, it's kind of a mirror of in school and colleges, where people wouldn't share their notes and all, so that someone else may do better. It is literally the same thing, just magnified to a monetary point of view and more learning, right? Which is really sad. Like, and this is a mentality cultural problem, I think. And the solve is that you try and find as many people like you and Arissa who kind of are providing this for free, which is absurd to me, right? The student is coming for internship, they are obviously contributing to your institute, right, in some way or form. That's why you're giving them an internship, and as a byproduct of that, they are learning what they're supposed to do in their final job. So it is a symbiotic system. It's not like the student
Absolutely.
comes to you and you are just shoving knowledge into them and they're not offering you anything, right? It's a mentality problem. You're not able to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I was shocked. I mean, when students
Yeah.
asked me this, I was just like, wait, what? I'm getting money from you. No, like, are you
Yeah.
mad? Like, I was
I
so
have paid
heartbroken
for it.
also. It's like,
I have paid for it when I was in my master's. I have paid for internships monthly. I think at that time, 2014 to 16, some $3,000 per month, right? And like it
I'm
was a
sorry,
three,
Bhaskar, that you had to
three,
do
4 months. I have
It's
to
just like,
apologize to my father, uh, right? And then the only good part was, because at that time, Christ University said that we will refund 50% of your payment that you're making, right? Which tells you that the university also knows it's a problem and they're willing to give you like a 50% discount on whatever payment you're making, right? Which is good on them. But they
yeah,
shouldn't have to incur that expense, right? Because that is an expense for them.
yeah.
That's being cut out from my fees, right? Um, and and it's a really bad
But
loop.
it's so systemic. Like
Yeah.
universities are aware of this, and it
Yeah.
still exists. And
They
like
can't do
I feel
anything
a
about
bit
it.
helpless. Like we can't do something about this right at this
Yeah.
stage. And
It
I think just ethically at Arisa, we're never ever taking money from you folks. If anyone wants to volunteer with us or intern with us, we're not taking money. If
Correct.
anything, if we get grants, we want to pay you for the work you do
Yeah.
for us. But
Yeah.
it just it blows my mind. But I think that's it's an ongoing topic, and it's something that I will always be really upset about. And I'm thinking of ways that at
See,
Arisa we
just
can do something to help
yeah.
this problem, but yeah, to solve this problem.
It's a problem, but just to be empathetic to these people who are taking the money, which they don't deserve this empathy, but it's also that it's a small field, it's not a money making field, and because of that, they are also under pressure to
Yeah.
get as much money as possible to sustain themselves, right? Now, the only thing is that I used to empathize with maybe 5 years ago, that psychology was not big enough at that time. It had a lot of taboo. People didn't really, care about it. They just thought it was some mumbo jumbo kind of thing. Um, Post COVID, there has been a marked change. People have begun to accept, participate, pay, and then it's on you, right? At that point, if you are getting enough, because there is never enough. Like you can always want more, but at some point you have to sit with yourself and just realize that you're extorting money from 18, 19, 20-year-olds, right? Um, because they are willing to learn and you're not willing to kind of give that for free. And then some of them will argue saying, oh, university is charging money for education. They should also give it for free. Yeah, the government universities do give it for free. Fees is like 1,500 bucks, 2,000 bucks per year, right? So
Yeah.
what are you comparing with? You know? Um, but it's not like the government universities are any better. I remember when I was at Jindal and we were looking for internship sites for our students because we were giving an RCI licensed course. One of the premier government clinical psychology related institutes in Delhi told us that your students will have to pay 5,000 rupees per month or per year to get access to our facilities and intern with us. Right.
Wow.
And the same thing was some thousand, and it's so systemic that the government university is also doing it. And they said we usually charge 1,000 bucks for government students, but for private it'll be 5,000 bucks or something like that. And then there was some debate discussion, and then they reduced it. But then we didn't feel it was right to pay. We didn't feel it was right for our students to pay. Obviously, there was also the part that they have to travel 2 hours every day one way to do the internship in Delhi. Um, but they are also looking at it as a form of like it's fine, chalta hai, paisa le lo. But these students, when they come to yours, they will reduce the load on your people. Na? Why aren't you
Yeah.
thinking of that? Why are you just thinking that you are offering? It's so egocentric.
It is extremely egocentric. I agree. And I think that's a bigger systemic problem. Like I said, I
Yeah,
think we can do a whole podcast episode on
yeah,
just that one problem. But since we're coming to the end of this conversation, and I am, aware of time and want to respect your time as well. Um, Quick, I guess, last few things to talk about. And just going to be a little bit like a rapid fire coffee with
okay.
Kohinoor kind of a situation. I think coming to, just human relationships and performances. You've now navigated through to being like a leadership position, professor, student yourself, entrepreneur. Rank in order of preference where you were at your most like content or satisfied in your
Student,
life.
no comparison. Being a student at Ferguson College was the top thing, not because of education or learning, but it was just great fun. It was a 3 year vacation at that point. Um, but just kidding aside, I think most content, uh, I think as a faculty member, as someone who's teaching, doing research on their own, having that space to kind of navigate at my own pace, I think that works well. Um, what were the other options? Leadership, entrepreneur,
Leadership,
entrepreneur,
entrepreneur, researcher.
writing. I would put writing as second,
Okay.
right?
Fiction writer. Yeah.
Fiction, non-fiction is harder to write, which is really weird. Uh, I find academic writing the easiest, followed by fiction, followed by non-fiction. Because in non-fiction, you're trying to tell a story with facts, right? And you can't be like, oh, the leaves are looking like this, and you can't give all of those descriptions. So it's really difficult to keep their attention engaged. So
Mm.
yeah, faculty writing, uh, followed by leadership and entrepreneur. I
Okay.
didn't really like I enjoyed being an entrepreneur as a part-time thing, right? I think I'll probably enjoy consulting while keeping my faculty job going, right? And as a secondary thing I do, um, because I couldn't wake up like I did it for 6 months, I think, being fully on board at One Stop Psychology. But I woke up every day trying to make a sale,
Mm.
which felt really uncomfortable because that's the point, right, of being an entrepreneur. You need to build revenue, money, whatever. It wasn't my thing. Whereas
Right.
I'm more of an ideas guy kind of thing. I can brainstorm, I can, discuss and put across that why don't we do this, strategize about it, all of this. But I don't want to do it full time. Leadership is fun, but leadership has always been something that's kind of been thrust upon me. It's not something I've desired, or even I'm beginning to like it primarily because there are so many bad ones around there that I feel kind of responsible now to do a good job with it and take care of your people. But there are so many people who are so exploitative as leaders in the academic space. It is really sad, um, and they don't think of their faculty as they don't understand that if your faculty members grow, your institution will grow and your university will grow. The cost
Right.
of it is some of them may leave because they've grown too much, right? But that fear cannot stop you from letting people grow, right? And a
Yeah.
lot of people in academia, Indian academia and leaders are like that, where they will cut people at their knees and they will do all of this kind of politicking and partiality and a lot of this kind of behavior so that
Mm.
they can remain on top, right? And they're very easily threatened, and these are personal problems, I guess. These are not structural issues, but gatekeeping and all of these kind of narcissism, all these behaviors are very highly prominent, right? And for a long time, I used to be on the rebellious side of things, where like places like where I worked, I was like, no, I will not do it, I will not do it. Then I realized that I'm kind of alone when I'm fighting these battles. People are coming after the meeting and they're telling me, "Oh, you're so courageous and you're standing up for us." But in the meeting, none of them are saying anything, right? Because everyone wants to save their own ass.
Yeah.
And I kind of understood that, and I was like, "Oh, okay, I don't need to be so boisterous about my disagreement." And then when I got leadership positions, I tried to be fair and I tried to be impartial and I tried to kind of be kind with it. And also, you have to be firm, obviously, right? It's not that you're not firm, but there is a way to do it which a lot of people don't kind of understand. They are just like very, I don't know what the right word is, but
Cutthroat.
yeah, they're not even cutthroat. Cutthroat is at least like you're smart enough. You're just easily threatened, and then
Mm.
you're treating people badly, but you're living in this
Right.
isolation ivory tower that, oh, I'm doing the right thing. And this whole narrative of for the institution is more important than the people in the institution, and for the sake of the institution I can treat people badly, right? It's not an either or. You can do both,
Yeah.
and you have to have the skill, right, to manage it. But people kind of don't have that, I feel. And that's where now leadership is something that I'm kind of okay with, because I feel like I am generally trying to be fair and impartial about things and trying to take care of the people that work with me, right? And the larger idea is that that will inevitably turn into something that will benefit everybody. And obviously, there will be costs to it, and there will be people who take advantage of it. But this is the point. In Indian academia, I will tell you this very clear statement. In Indian academia, India in general, I think it's about dealing with the bottom 5% and creating policy laws so that that bottom 5% doesn't get away with things. And because it's like that, and you're trying to take the runt of the litter to so that they don't escape, what ends up happening is that the larger group who actually want to do good work, who are focused, who are not taking advantage of the situation, start to get demoralized, because those policies are not applicable to them, but they are now forced to reckon with those, right, and deal with those. So obviously their motivation levels will dip, because they're like, I didn't do this, right? Why am I suddenly expected to clock in at 9 and leave at 4:30 because somebody else is coming only for their class? So, and that's a very small percentage. And the thing is, in these leaders, they see that 5% and they want to stop them from taking advantage because they're paying them, and they have to respond.
Right.
And in that process, this top level, this huge bigger group of people who are actually interested in doing the work, they kind of get demoralized and they leave because they don't want to be treated like that, right? Because they've not done anything that, yeah. So this is a general India problem, I think, but in Indian academia, you see this very often.
Right. And that's such an interesting allegory or kind of example that you just gave. And I think as leaders, I'm empathetic to leaders, but I also understand the responsibility of being a
Yeah,
leader now running RSA. So I
yeah,
totally feel what you just said.
yeah,
And also the idea that a lot of laws kind of apply to the people who take advantage of the system, but these people who are taking advantage of the system are in percentage, if you do the
yeah,
stats on it, they're really
yeah, yeah.
it's a small number. So
Yeah.
totally get
And
that.
they'll take advantage of it irrespective. You are living
Yeah,
in your ivory tower thinking, I will make this policy and these guys will now no longer be able to get away with it. Their whole mentality is to get away with it. So they will find something to get away with. Then
yeah,
you'll
yeah.
create another policy that is even more stringent. And eventually your system will become so tight that nobody will be able to survive within it. It'll become a cauldron of just stress and whatever.
Pressure. Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
I completely agree. But in the backdrop of all that negativity and whatever
Sorry.
else, and systemic problems and individual problems and leadership
Yes.
problems,
Yeah. Yeah.
tell me, Bhaskar, one last message that you want to leave our community with, our students with, our faculty, anyone who's listening to this podcast, anything that you'd like to share with them as we bring this podcast to an end.
That's a very open-ended thing. Um, I think psychology is a very important subject to kind of get into now. It will only grow from this point on, especially with AI and all these other things that's happening. Um, I think the if you're a psychologist already and if you've been educated in the subject already, I also want to say that I think you need to recognize your own power and recognize how deeply influential your discipline is, because I don't think people really understand how impactful psychology has been across the world in so many
Mhm.
disciplines. Today, traditional economics is more or less dead. It's behavioral economics that's working, right? Which is psychology based economics. They may call it behavioral economics, but without psychology, that subject is no longer existent. It's the same with neuroscience, the same with cognitive science, it's the same with your language learning models now, right? All of it emerges from this subject. Your design today is influenced by all of this UX design, and all of this is based on the user's understanding, right?
Yeah.
uh, this is literally the only subject that really focuses on the individual and understanding the individual and how that individual can be influenced. You can persuade, you can change, you can help, assist, so many different things. So it's a increasingly important subject. It's an increasingly destigmatized subject. It's still not at the same level as a computer science or whatever MBA. Um, but it's an important subject and it needs to recognize that on its own. Today's statistics is what it is because psychology really like went for it, right? Which is a problem also, and it's a good thing also. That's a different discussion. But I think that's my message, that you recognize that it's not just any era gara kind of subject. It's a very important subject and it'll increasingly get more important. And Arissa is at the forefront of something like this because there aren't many places in India that are a not-for-profit organization that is working with research and trying to get grants and this kind of thing. Um, and I hope it continues to grow because it's very, very, very important.
Thank you, Bhaskar. I really appreciate the plugin. And I also hope it continues to grow. And this is also a call for funders. Please sponsor us and donate to
Yes.
us because,
Yes.
we need the funding to keep
Yeah.
running. But that apart, I think, Bhaskar, you really highlighted a lot of important things in about psychology being important. And also, I think I want to add to that that psychology within other spaces is also very, very important. So more interdisciplinary spaces where psychology has a voice, whether that's computer science or AI or subjects that we might think, behind our closed doors in narrow boxes that what psychology got to do with engineering, what psychology got to do with medicine. I think they're so interconnected and interrelated that opening up doors, not just in terms of, hey, I'm only going to do psychology, but also how psychology can apply to different spaces and be part of interdisciplinary and intersectional conversations, I think is so important.
Just to add to that, like the place I'm working in, right, Masters Union, our program is a psychology and marketing program. And before I joined here and before I started to tweak my teaching for the marketing space, I never really had much respect for marketing, very honestly. I just thought it was, oh, you're trying to persuade people to, buy stuff. Um, and the deeper I've started to read about it, the more I've realized this subject applies psychology really well.
Yeah.
Like it does it better than most other psychology professions do. And they take all of these principles and they kind of use it really well, and it's for good stuff also. And of course, there is the dark angle to everything. But I think you're absolutely correct that those interdisciplinary spaces are very, very important, and you need to it needs to understand that at the end of the day, we are all working with human beings and intelligence, right? It is inevitable that this subject is going to overlap with more or less all subjects, because everywhere you have to actually deal with people.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, thank you so much, Bhaskar, for
Thank
being a
you
part
for
of RSR's podcast. And thank you so much to our listeners and viewers. This has been a great conversation. And I am really, really grateful once again, Bhaskar, for your time and for your insights. Yeah, thank
thank you,
you.
Gosal. Thank you for inviting me. This was really fun. I got a chance to express a lot of the deeply held thoughts that you can't really talk about everywhere. But I am trying to write a few newspaper articles and books on this kind of a thing. But let's see where that goes. But thank you so much. It was great.
This was awesome. Thank you. And I'm looking forward to those chapters, books, whatever you're talking about.
Yeah.
Happy to also read them and give you feedback because I'm awesome
Yeah.
at giving feedback. No, I'm kidding. But thank you. Thank you so much once again
Thank
for
you.
being a part
Thank
of the
you.
podcast, Bhaskar.
Thank you.
See you soon.
See
Bye,
you.
listeners and viewers as well.